and today's video we're going to discuss politics. I am here, my dear friend Scott, who is joining us for this podcast for a good 30-ish minutes to talk about his experience and to talk a little bit about the small election that's coming up in 2024. Nobody's paying attention to that. Who cares? So tell us a little bit about you.
Luis, it's a real pleasure to be on. This is, in fact, my first podcast recording ever. Very happy to be here and happy to be here with a friend. I was watching some of your videos earlier, and it's a real pleasure to be on the show.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. So now you're like a subscriber, a fan, like clicking like on those videos. It's most important. That's for sure. And give the viewers like just an overall idea as to like what you do. They know your field is in politics, but what specifically do you do, and how did you arrive at that?
So broadly, I'd think of myself as a Democratic digital strategist and a content creator. Currently, I work with content creators with an organization called the American Experiment Project. Previously, I was a creator myself with the Center for American Progress. And broadly, since 2020, I have worked to make sure that voters in key swing states understand who the people at the top of the ticket are for the Democrats. In 2020, it was President Biden. Now it's Vice President Harris. And make sure that they understand what these folks are working to do for the American people.
That's great. And talk a little bit about the Center for Progress. What was your work there?
With the Center for American Progress, which is a very prominent think tank, I was a video creator. So do everything soup to nuts, writing scripts, working with folks to get those filmed. Some of them I appeared in as the sort of narrator. Other folks would appear in, or there would not be an on-screen narrator. Then I would edit them, turn them around. And it was a real pleasure because for the first time I was in some of these videos, and videos I appeared in have been viewed millions of times across the internet. There's one that was a bit of a skit with me talking to myself, one side playing a MAGA Republican, the other side playing sort of most Americans, and just making sure that in a funny way, folks really understand the stakes of this election we're going into.
Oh yeah, and I think I know the video you're referring to is really funny. It's did you manage to like post it on all social media sites, including TikTok and whatnot? It had the TikTok format.
Yeah, it keeps getting reposted. Now this posted it in June, and then it was another couple million views. And honestly, it just keeps pinging around and people keep texting me about it. We tried to keep a lot of them under 60 seconds, but the joke in the office was that I always had too much to say. So my scripts got up there to about 100 seconds, which is wow for TikTok.
Well, yeah, definitely. We have the, nowadays we have, and I included myself, the attention span of a squirrel. So that helps, that it keeps I think 45 seconds is still like, whoa, that's a lot. I'm still old enough to remember Vines. So that tells you something about my age.
I miss Vine to this day.
There you go. So let's get down to some of the questions, shall we? So I previewed the audience a little bit about this, but I wanted to divide this interview or like podcast style conversation into certain segments, but this will all like surround like the entrance of Kamala Harris into the race. As viewers know, Joe Biden dropped out of contention in late July, and Kamala Harris assumed the role as Democratic nominee for president, and with picking then Tim Walz as VP, for those of us who are not initiated. So first of all, like your initial reaction, we're now in September 8th as at the time of this recording. What was your initial thoughts when you first heard the news?
I think I, like a lot of people, was genuinely shocked. Going back to 2023, folks would come and ask me, is it really going to be Biden? And, I was following him preparing to run. And I would say, yes, it probably will be. He probably will win the Democratic primary. Most incumbent presidents do. And everything changed that night of the debate. That night was actually one of my last days working with Cap. We stayed up till 3 a.m. filming a debate reaction skit. And I had a sense that the debate would be tough to watch generally, because anytime that I have to watch 90 minutes of Donald Trump talk, I don't know that that's my preferred hobby. But I had a sense that it would be tough, but really had no idea how tough. And then fast forward to that moment, I believe on July 21st, a Sunday when he dropped out. It was genuine shock, and my instant reaction was Vice President Harris is the person who has to assume the mantle. Yeah. So I'm really thrilled with how it's gone.
Makes sense. I know that that debate seems like a century ago, given in politics and political terms. But after the debate, of course, Trump's performance is generally pretty awful, objectively speaking. But what did you think of like Biden's performance in that debate?
I think, unfortunately, President Biden left a lot on the table, and his age really showed. He just had a hard time making the case for why Americans would be better off with President himself or any Democratic candidate at the top of the ticket. So I think what President Biden has done since then has been truly remarkable when you think about leaders with access to such power, and for him to turn it over to his second in command shows just what a just an impressive person he is, to put his country over himself and make sure that we can move forward and turn the page on what has been a divisive 8 years of dealing with Donald Trump.
For sure. And we don't want to hang around with Biden too long, like Donald Trump seems to like to do in his rallies. I want to ask you about like the switch. Yeah, he seems to be like coping so hard. But shifting a little bit to like, if I would have been winning by such a large margin, I would have missed him as well. Shifting over to like Harris effect now on the campaign, it's been about like a month and a half ish. There's a debate happening in 2 days, actually, right? If I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
Now that we have a little bit of perspective, we wanted to make this. I remember we wanted to make this podcast like a little bit after Labor Day, because that's when things start to get serious. There's a lot of things to consider. It's a new. This says probably. I can't remember the last time this has happened in American history, where like mid-cycle. Oh, I think it was Nixon, if I'm not mistaken, or was it?
When there was a switch president at the top of the ticket like this?
Like, I think it was like with, my goodness, it was, it's been a while. It's been a while.
It's been a long time.
It's been a long time, but this is the first time it's been so close to like November. Yeah. Like in July has never happened. So given those dynamics, what do you think are Harris' like strengths going into this, and what are her weaknesses? Or challenges?
Going into the debate specifically, or the campaign?
I would say first going into the debate, and then you can talk about it going into the campaign specifically.
Well, Vice President Harris has just an impressive track record of working in government to make government work for people. She was a prosecutor, the district attorney for San Francisco. She was the attorney general of all of San Francisco, a senator, obviously the vice president. And I think she has really come into her own in the past couple of years, just as a speaker and someone who's able to make the case, specifically when talking about reproductive rights and making sure that we have a government that's not taking away the rights of Americans, but instilling freedom and making sure that people have the opportunity to make their own choices. So going into this debate, I think, especially considering the last one, I tend to have my blood pressure run a little higher than maybe my doctor would love.
Yeah.
But I think she's a tremendous orator. She did a great job working with, or speaking to and grilling some of Trump's Supreme Court appointees back in 2018 as a senator. And I expect her to really make the case for her candidacy and against another 4 years of Donald Trump.
Yeah, for sure. And so I want you to speak to like the kind of like the narrative that the campaign has been choosing to run with. Like as Republicans have been traditionally the ones to coin the term freedom. Meaning freedom to bear arms or freedom to like engage in sort of quote unquote traditional conservative practices, right? Why do you think it has been coined by the Harris campaign? What is freedom to the Harris campaign?
Well, when I think about freedom, especially in the last couple years, I think about the freedom to make choices that are right for you and your family in your doctor's office. Republicans love to talk about having small government, but they want government just small enough to reach into your doctor's office, into your appointments. And Tim Walz said that. I'm not going to claim credit for that one.
Yeah.
When I think about freedom, I think about a system that empowers the middle class, not just to get by, but to get ahead with tax policies that aren't just giveaways to the wealthiest corporations and Americans. Donald Trump significantly lowered the taxes for billionaires when he was president, and Vice President Harris and President Biden has worked to raise those and make sure that we address the cost of living crisis. When I think about what freedom means in this election, I think about the opportunity to be free from exorbitant price hikes. The Trump campaign is calling for a 60% tariff on everything that comes from China and a 10% tariff that comes from everything abroad. And what this would be, in effect, is a tax levied on all goods that would make everything even more difficult to afford in a time where prices are so high, and it's at really the top of voters' minds. So I think about the freedom to get ahead, and that's really what I think Vice President Harris is bringing to the top of the ticket.
And that's good. I think it's a smart strategy for her to take away that term from the Republicans, which is probably why they're having such a tough time kind of like attacking Harris and going personal instead of like attacking her ideas. And it's been a month and they still haven't been able to define Harris. They've been using the traditional she's a communist, whatnot, but they've used that with probably every single presidential candidate in the past couple of cycles.
Right.
With that being said, I'm going to shift to the state of the race, right? We were in talking about Kamala and her campaign, and I want to shift a little bit to the state of the race. And with that, before I ask you the question associated to that, I want to show the viewers some polls. So right now on the national, this is per 538. That's what I'm showing on screen. Kamala Harris is up on the aggregate of polls by 2.8% as of the time of this recording. If we look at some of the battleground states like Arizona, Trump is up by 0.5% on the average. If we look at other states such as Nevada, another battleground state, 0.5, Harris is up by 0.5%. In North Carolina, Trump is up by 0.8%. If we go to the traditional Rust Belt, Pennsylvania, Harris is up by 0.6%. If we go to another Rust Belt state, in this case, it would be the state of Wisconsin. Harris is up by 0.6%. Pennsylvania, Harris was up also by 0.6%. And finally, Michigan, Harris is up by 2.7%. That appears to be her highest margin out of all the battleground states. And finally, Georgia, Harris is up by 0.3%. With that, I want to ask, what do you think is the state of the race when compared to, let's say, the 2020 cycle? At this time around, we had, and I have the data right here. This time around, Biden was up by 1.2% in Georgia. This time around, Biden was up, let's just say, so we don't have to look at all the polls, by 1.2% in Wisconsin. So Biden was up slightly higher at this same time than Harris is right now. So with that being said, I'll give you the simple question of what is the state of the what is the state of the race?
Goodness. I think you really hit it on the head there. It's a toss-up, right? What's important to know is the margin of error for a lot of these polls is 3 points, 3%. So when we're talking about margins like 0.5%, 0.7%, 3% is the margin of error. We really don't know which way that's going. And she has I think you said roughly 2.5% national lead. But the presidential race is not decided at the national level. It's decided in about 7 swing states. So at this point, what you need to know is that every dollar you give in fundraising, every door you knock on, every phone call you make, every friend you tell about this race, encourage them to sign up to vote, make sure their voter registration is confirmed. It all matters at this point. And we're recording this before the debate. I'm not quite sure when it's coming out, but this debate really could be a significant turning point one way or another. But even if it's not, this is going to be a nail biter all the way to the end.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's the best way you can strong arm the question, the state of the race. It is, in fact, I would say a toss-up. I mean, if you ask Nate Silver, he'll say Trump has a 67%, but then he'll say, yeah, but that also means that Harris has a 2 in 4 chance of winning the election. Generally, math. If you ask 538, they haven't released their forecast yet, but I believe they'll probably tell you something like a 55 to 45 split or something of that around that range. Politico, I think, has them 50-50 as well. The Economist as well. So it's a different race. What might give some, democratically aligned voters some anxiety is that generally Republicans have had an advantage on the Electoral College. And in the Trump era, there's been, and maybe you disagree with this, but there's been a sort of like a tendency to outperform the polls. So some pollsters, for example, will take that 2.7% margin that Harris has in Michigan and give the victory to Trump because, he outperformed the polls by 5% or 3% or whatnot. And I don't like to look at it that same way because I believe every election is different and has different dynamics. And, that was versus Hillary and a historically unpopular candidate at the time. I think we can objectively say that regardless of whatever spectrum whatever side of the political spectrum you are. But what are some, with this being said, what are some things that the Harris campaign is doing that is different to what happened in 2016? The reason I'm comparing it to 2016 is, of course, because that's the last time there was a major party female nominee for president.
Yeah, I think a couple things. The polls, Republicans have outperformed the polls when Trump was at the top of the ticket. To know it was predicted to be a big red wave in 2022, that Republicans would sweep the House and take back the Senate. And that fundamentally didn't happen. See, since Roe v. Wade was overturned and this conservative Supreme Court took away the rights of women to make their own decisions between them and their doctors and their families, Democrats have been outperforming. And I think that really sets this at a new place. Now, thinking to what Vice President Harris is doing, I think over the 8 years of Trump, Vice President Harris and the Democrats have gotten a sense of how to run against his candidacy. He seeks to divide Americans. He is a historically unpopular candidate who has hung around and run for president 3 times after losing. And this is new, right? I don't want to say it's never happened, but for him to be at the top of the ticket 3 presidential elections in a row after losing the second one is historically relatively unprecedented. And he will try to make the race about him or about the things he wants to talk about, like whether Vice President Harris is both black and South Asian. And she's not taking the bait. You saw it in her CNN interview. She said, same old story, next question. Because ultimately, Americans care about who our politicians are, but we care about who's going to make our lives better. And what she's continually brought the focus back to is lowering the cost of living for Americans, making sure that Americans have the ability to make decisions in their own lives free from government interference. So he's going to cause a sideshow, but she's not focusing on that. She's focusing on how to make lives better for Americans.
For sure. Talk to a little bit, and these are the last bits, the last couple of questions, and we'll end on a happier tone, maybe with some experiences that you've had of your own. But I want to talk about a little bit about the effect that RFK is having on the race. Do you think it's skewing towards Trump to a greater degree, or is it helping Harris to a greater degree? Just unpack that for the viewers.
So I want to start by talking about third parties at large. In so many ways, the American government and system have not been working for so many people. Wealth inequality is near or at an all-time high. Rights for people in their own doctor's offices have been stripped away recently. We're engaged in really foreign wars that are really dividing Americans. And in so many ways, it makes sense to look for another option. So I want to really start by validating that point, that looking at an RFK, looking at a Jill Stein, looking at a Cornel West makes sense. When we think about these options, though, 2 months, 3 months before the general election is a difficult time to make this significant change. So when you look at RFK, obviously he's dropped out of the presidential race, but will remain on the ballot in a few states. He has endorsed Trump, but a lot of his popularity has plummeted within the past 3 or 4 months. And he has shown himself to be really out there to support Trump in the MAGA agenda. Someone like Jill Stein has run for president, ran against Barack Obama in 2012, ran against Hillary Clinton in 2016, and now is running against Vice President Harris now. And the conservatives know that she will predominantly take from folks who would vote for the Democrats. The votes for her and other third-party candidates were the margin between Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump winning. And she, going back to 2016 and before, has had close ties to Russia. She went to a gala in 2015 in Russia and sat at the same table as Vladimir Putin. And looking at someone like Cornel West, who accepted a donation from ultra-conservative donor Harlan Crow, who you may know for being close to Clarence Thomas, the conservative Supreme Court justice. And he returned that donation only after receiving blowback. He defended it and then gave the donation back. And even now, within the past month, news has come out of conservative legal activists working to make sure that he is on the ballot, again, because they know that he will risk taking voters away from the Democrats. At this point where we are, a vote for a third-party candidate will be a vote for Trump. Because of who's in the race, we know that. That is ultimately the effect. But if we want to focus on the effect of voting for a third-party candidate, I'd recommend we look forward to advocating for measures like ranked choice voting, something that will let you actually put the person as number one that you want to see in the seat, but then rank your second choice. So in that instance, let's say I wanted to vote for a Jill Stein. That would not fundamentally be a vote for Trump, because I would vote Vice President Harris as my second ticket or my second choice. And then, it will better skew where the election goes. And the last point on these candidates is that they're not even on the ballot in all 50 states. So you need to focus not just on what you want out of the system, but what you want the effect of your vote to be. So I think that summarizes my third-party point of view there. And I'm curious what you think about this. I know you've talked about this a lot.
It's curious that you mentioned ranked choice voting, because we it's not some obscure theory. It's something that is in practice in Alaska. That's why you have a Democratic representative from Alaska due to ranked choice voting. I definitely agree that the system in voting system in all 50 states should be ranked choice voting. And that doesn't need like federal approval. It just needs the individual state legislatures to do that. I understand the inclination to obviously do politically, I think, attack these individual candidates, because of course you're very much on the Democratic side. But a person who is voting for these independent candidates is voting for them, and I think you spoke to this a little bit, because they're disaffected with the two main choices that have won since the pre-Civil War era. so what, in addition to, hey, these guys are bad or Trump is bad, what are some things that Harris is doing to convince those voters into the tent, other than if you vote third party, Trump will win, which is a fact and a risk they have calculated and they are taking, right? What do you do to bring them in?
When I think about Harris, the candidacy is new, so she's still releasing policy platforms. But one thing that she has focused on is her policy towards building and strengthening the middle class. So she's proposed building millions new housing units, because we fundamentally have a housing supply shortage in the United States. She's proposed making it easier for first-time homebuyers through tax credits to purchase their first homes. She's proposed a ban on price gouging, so that grocery stores cannot indefinitely raise the price of our goods, but make sure that it is a balance of supply and demand. And she's proposed tax credits to help families with children. So there's an amount, I want to say $6,000 for the first year of a child's life. Then I think it's $3,600 from age 2 to age, I want to say 5. I don't remember off the top of my head. And then from age, let's say 6 to 18, it'll be another $3,000 a year. And the thing is, this is not just a proposal. We know this works to cut child poverty. Vice President Harris was the deciding vote in the American Rescue Plan, which passed in 2021, which was the COVID relief bill from the Democrats after President Biden took office. But it also had an expanded version of the child tax credit, which for the year of 2021 until it expired at the end, cut child poverty by a third or a half. And we know this works, is the way I think about this. And I honestly feel like in our politics, both sides will talk about building families. But if we're not trying to cut child poverty and put food in people's mouths, in children's mouths, I honestly don't really know what we're doing.
Yeah, for sure. I agree to that to a certain extent, of course. I think, and the viewers know that I am, was a Bernie but not bust voter, to be specific, right? I voted for Bernie in the primary in 2016, 2020, and in 2020 I voted for Biden in the general election. This year I was going to do I voted for Marianne Williamson in the primary, and then I was not going to vote for any of the major candidates. I was actually going to vote for Cornel West if he appeared on the ballot. But since Harris came in, I am planning to vote for her. I always like to keep it transparent.
I want to encourage folks, if you're passionate about this issue, to continue to be involved. You know, the switch from President Biden to Vice President Harris was in large part because of the activism of individuals who are passionate about a host of issues, right? The choice of Governor Walz as the vice presidential ticket. Again, the activism we do matters. Every phone call, every door knock, every dollar donated. These are massive systems we're working to implement. And I haven't gotten to talk about local politics, but that's really another opportunity to make a significant impact. But to focus on this choice in this election, we have a choice between a commander-in-chief who will actively work for a ceasefire and who will not be shy in talking about it, and a commander-in-chief who would rather let Israel, quote-unquote, finish the job.
And with that, we get to some of the final questions. I would say kind of like the final question, although you spoke to it a little bit, which was, what advice would you give to someone looking to get involved in politics today?
Amazing. Yeah, I want to talk about local politics because that's where I started, right?
There you go.
I was actively anti-political when I was in college. I felt like I used to say I could hardly manage what was 10 feet in front of my face. I'm not going to sit and make opinions about things that I fundamentally do not know about. But when President Trump was elected, even my non-political self knew that this was bad, simply from the divisiveness that he ran on, from the division that I saw and the anger that I saw of the people among me and within my family. Some of my family supports Trump, some support the Democrats. So what I did after this is I got involved locally community organizing with the New York Civil Liberties Union and the campaign to close Rikers Island. And me, just as a volunteer and a fellow, were able to see significant legislation passed and changes made in New York City, where I lived at the time. Rikers Island is on its way to being closed. We advocated the New York government to pass protections for reproductive care, something that would be really important down the line, as we know. And I was able to see the impact of my going to meetings, having conversations, making phone calls. If you are interested in politics, I really recommend starting at the local level. Just from an empowerment point of view, you will see the impact of your work so much more significantly if you advocate for something that you believe in your local community. And I believe that's fundamentally what all politics is. It's all local, and that's the best place to start.
And how do people reach out to you?
I have a LinkedIn. You could send me a message there. I am a baby TikToker at Scott on the Spot with 2 T's on the end of that. Love a message there.
What are some things that you do that viewers would be interested in hiring you for?
I am a digital strategist, and I create content. So if you're looking for funny and informative videos, you can come to me. If you're looking to work with content creators to spread a message, come to me. If you're looking to workshop a message and interested in a local run, one more plug I'll make is if you are aligned with, let's say, liberally minded or even independently minded, a website that I used to work for called traindemocrats.org offers 100% free training to learn about the campaign system, with the idea that the person who runs and is in power in your local community shouldn't necessarily be the person who is the wealthiest. It should be the person who is the most involved and may not be able to afford those expensive political consultants, but can go to traindemocrats.org, learn what they need to know, and make change in their community. So, yeah.
That's perfect. That's an excellent plug. And with that, I thank you for joining me and the viewers in this podcast. And hopefully we can meet in during other moments, maybe after the debate. Who knows? Maybe turn into a panel. Who knows?
Yeah.
We'll see. We'll see.
Goodness.
Thank you for taking
nervous.
the time, though. Yeah.
I'm excited and I am nervous. Last time we did this, the person at the top of the Democratic ticket changed. So
yeah. Well, I'm like, there's like every week has felt like a decade. So I'll be happy to just have a week be a week. There you go.
Well, thank you so much for your wonderful questions and your wonderful moderating.